Hi there, I'm Jordan, host of PeopleFirst, the Young Careers podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about neurodiversity in the workplace and showing how you can learn to thrive and build a career you love. I'm joined by Amie Barlow, ADHD wellness coach, and Molly Reid, Lean Six Sigma consultant here at ManpowerGroup. Hi ladies.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you so much for being with me today. I'm really looking forward to catching up properly. So just to start, can you both tell me a little bit about yourselves, what you do, give me the full elevator pitch, and I'm going to come to you first, Molly.
Thank you, Jordan. So I'm Molly Reid. I work for ManpowerGroup in Talent Solutions. My job title is quite fancy. So it's the RPO Lean Advisory Consultant. What that actually means is that I work with our organisation to look at how we can streamline and optimise, adding as much value as we can to our clients and our candidates.
Beautifully put.
Do you think so?
I think it was really, really great.
Good. Thank you very much.
You've got a tough
Yeah, I know.
follow you, mate. Come on.
My heart's like beating on my chest.
Thank you so much,
No
Jordan. Hi, everyone. My name is Amie Barlow, and I am an ADHD wellness and business coach. And yeah, it kind of says it in the title, really. I advocate for neurodivergent women in the workspace to ensure that they have a good work-life balance and that they operate from a place where they're looking after themselves as well as embracing their ADHD powers.
Wonderful again. And I'm just going to give a shout out to someone else we've got in the room, which is Molly's lovely son, Noah. He's here with us. You can't see him, but he's making sure he's involved. And something we ask all of our guests whenever they come on the podcast is, what was your very, very first job? And I'm not even talking about the ones with your national insurance number. Like, what was the first thing you were doing in employment?
Okay, so, well, I guess my first job was like when I was 14, I worked for Pizza Hut. But if that was on national insurance, probably. So probably a paper round.
Nice.
Yeah, paper round.
So I was a horsey girl.
Okay.
So I was working down my local riding stables in exchange for pony lessons. And I was, probably started that about 12 or 13, I think.
Love that. And how long were you there for?
Oh, goodness me, up until I was about probably 17 or 18, I think.
Nice.
Amazing.
That was it. My first job was pretty similar to yours. So I swept the floors in a vet. But after that, I went and worked in Topshop, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
you know, when
one
you're
of those,
16,
yeah.
But yeah, I love hearing what people used to do and what they're in now, and the total contrast between it is crazy.
It's huge, yeah.
I know. And we're starting light, but today is probably quite a needed podcast, but quite a personal topic for you both. I'm going to just go straight in. Molly, when did you discover that you were dyslexic?
So I was a bit of a late joiner to the diagnostic party. I didn't have my formal diagnosis until I was 40. So, which was not only a blessed relief, but also a bit of a shock as well, if I'm being honest, because everyone, I came up being sort of quite severely dyslexic, and when I had my appraisal, she said, I don't know how you've coped. And I thought, I don't know how I've coped either, but I just have. And I know we'll talk about this probably a bit later, but that is one of the real superpowers of people that have neurodiverse, is around the resilience and finding ways and different ways of approaching problems and solving problems.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a long journey for me, but I think the diagnosis is really one of the really first steps to understanding it, and it's that penny drop moment of, oh, so that's why I do this, and oh, so that's why I do that.
Yeah, and you probably had the mirror pointed at you, and you feel that you could understand yourself maybe a bit more once you had it.
Definitely. So I'm not an expert in dyslexia. I'm an expert in my own dyslexia, but even then that still constantly surprises me what my brain can do and what my brain definitely cannot do, which can often just either makes me laugh or frustrates the hell out of me, one or the other. But just learning to accept it is absolutely key.
Yeah, and that acceptance is something we're going to come back to
Yeah,
later on for sure. But Amie, I know your diagnosis was a little bit different. So before we move on, I just want to hear from you.
For sure. Yeah, so, and it's really interesting what you said actually, Molly, sorry, just to reflect on that I think when you do have a diagnosis later on in life, you have that's why I did that, that's why I did that, and it kind of all comes together. But on the note of my diagnosis, so I was actually diagnosed with ADD when I was 11 years of age. So it wasn't uncommon knowledge to me throughout my whole entire life, pretty much, that I had some form of neurodiversity. But it wasn't until probably 3 or 4 years ago that I started to understand that a lot of the things that I didn't think were associated with having ADD that were actually because of that as well. And now moving forwards, as obviously research has advanced, it's not actually a thing on its own anymore. It's just a part of having ADHD. So I started to do my own research and understand that potentially I didn't have just ADD. I didn't have because that is classed as just the attentive side or inattentive side. So when I did my own research, I actually had a re-diagnosis and I came back with combined ADHD. And I'm also exploring whether I also have autism at the moment as well. So yeah.
Okay. And not to sound ignorant, but from a genuine place of interest.
For sure.
But in a nutshell, or in your words, what is the difference between ADD, ADHD, or what is that connection?
Yeah, so obviously the standpoint for ADHD is attention hyperactivity deficit disorder. So what they were sort of saying is that, especially with women, when it is sort of misdiagnosed because you're not this expressive, hyperactive person that's throwing chairs around the classroom, the deficit is that you are just inattentive. And then the hyperactivity side of things is obviously where you're a bit more expressive, disruptive to your peers, etc. So it's almost like thinking of those two things as separate entities, but they actually are all underneath the ADHD umbrella.
Yeah, perfect. And I know it might sound like a silly question.
No,
but
not at all.
Why is getting a diagnosis so important? What does it change? And what did it change for both of you?
So for me, it made me realise that actually I wasn't stupid. I think it's probably the best word. I was trying to think of other words.
It's heartbreaking to even think that you got like that, you know?
But when you're at school, you have to fit a certain mould in order to pass your exams. And if you don't fit that mould, you are told by teachers that you are lazy or lacking in attention or, you know, whatever that may look like. And of course, that then carries on into a working and professional life where you don't get things. Sometimes you just don't get them. And you feel ashamed and you feel all these very negative thoughts and you have to mask who you are because you want to fit in, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to sort of give people evidence that you're stupid. So when you get the diagnosis, you go, I'm not stupid, I'm just different.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely key. And I think the diagnosis to getting early is absolutely key, especially for people going through school and university and college or whatever that may look like, because they will need to learn slightly differently to how others learn.
Yeah. And that it's unfortunate for those being the most formative years of your life. Difference in school isn't always accepted, regardless of any form of difference.
Yeah.
So how you navigated that is almost unrelatable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if your story echoes that, Amie, or if you find the same sort of thing. But when you got that first diagnosis, when you were 11, you said, how did that change your perspective on you, your outlook on it?
It's so funny that I had the diagnosis so young, because I think when I say that, people think that I had a better idea of what that actually meant growing up. But it was more that my parents tried to support me, and they thought, we get the diagnosis for her. Well, they thought that it could have been dyslexia and other neurodiverse conditions, but obviously that was just ADD at the time. And they put me in private education. I always knew that I would have extra time in exams, but I feel like even though you get given these things, it was great having the extra time, but I still wasn't taught the topic in the way that I needed to be taught. So it was almost counterintuitive for me to do that. And I think that, knowing about it, I just knew that because I used to joke and just say, oh, it's just me not concentrating. I'm a bit ditzy. And then moving on to later on in my life, I think it felt more empowering getting my second diagnosis. Because as I've moved on as well, like I have autoimmune issues and conditions that have come up too. And a lot of things, like I get burnt out very quickly. And it's nice to know that it's not because my tolerance isn't there as an entrepreneur. I actually have a neurodiversity and I need to advocate for that.
Yeah. What are some things that you love about how your mind works? And you touched on some things and you touched on some things, but I want to know what it is.
Oh, well, I would definitely say that I love the fact that I am so creative. My brain works in like 5 different ways at once. And I was told all my life you should focus on one thing. And now I'm in this space. I'm like, amazing. Like I can handle things. And I've had to train myself to finish and start and finish projects. I'm not a serial starter and I'm not finish it. But it's nice to be able to have that outside the box thinking, definitely. And because it was really interesting what you said earlier, Molly, about superpower. And I feel like that I've heard lots of different controversial things on LinkedIn about that. People are like, don't call it a superpower. And I'm like, well, it kind of is. It definitely is, because you, like, especially with hyperfocus, if you learn to channel that in the right way, that is lethal, but in a good way. Because I can like zone in on something, and when I'm on it, I'm in that task and I can get it done in an amazing way.
Totally.
But it's just finding the balance, like what I've been learning, which is what we'll talk about. It's how to channel that without pushing it too far.
Yeah.
So I say they're kind of the things that I love about having a neurodiversity.
And what you've just said is like ringing things in my head. I have a really great friend, and he's, he has ADHD, and he's a serial hobbyist, and I mean like everything. Like he's rock climbing 1 minute, and then next thing he's doing archery. But he barbecued for 40 people at my birthday party 2 weeks ago, and that is like a perfect task for him, you know, because he can perform, he can excel, and that's it, you know. And I didn't realize maybe always that was like a trait of neurodiversity, but now it makes sense in my head, you know. And then going back to you, Molly, I'll give you your turn. What do you think? To call it a superpower, what do you think is the crux of it?
I mean, I absolutely, Amie, I totally, everything you've said, I'm like, yep. Oh yeah, that as well. But for me, it's around really understanding very complex problems and being able to get to the root cause of them, and kind of, I always think of it like a plate of spaghetti, being able to pull one end and really understand what's going on. And I draw Visio diagrams in my head, which I know sounds a bit weird, but that's kind of how I work it. I'm kind of putting things into buckets and understanding where things go. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle that I'm constantly working on and building up that picture of. And the hyperfocus is a fabulous thing. I wish I could kind of turn it on in an instant, because when it's there, it's brilliant. But with the neurodiversity does come the challenge of sometimes feeling rather overwhelmed at the beginning of a project as well. I think we're going to talk around the challenges in a bit. But, you know, you need, in order to solve problems and create solutions for customers, you need to have a different way of thinking to those that have already created them.
Yeah.
And that's why I think neurodiversity is such a brilliant skill to have.
Strength,
One last thing on that. Sorry to cut in, but
always cut in. Always cut in.
I'm like, is it like a wait your turn? But another thing I would say as well is that the one attribute that we have is to be very emotionally in tune with people and very empathetic. And I find you know, as a coach, there's billions of coaches out there, but I'm able to connect with my clients on another level that maybe others may not be able to. And I think that I'm like, yeah, I've got that. It's nice. It's a nice feeling.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because lived experience supports lived experience. So if you recognize it in someone else or someone else recognizes it in you, it's easy to understand then the thought process behind that, you know? And
Definitely.
People First, the podcast, is all about the world of work. And we know it can be a source of distress for people, especially if they are neurodiverse. Why might this be the case? And what are some of the challenges people may face in the workplace?
Again, for me, it can be, if you haven't had the diagnosis, it's probably first of all trying to work out why you're feeling so stressed and very overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
If you have had the diagnosis, that does help. I think neurodiverse people get anxiety much more than non-neurodiverse. There is some science that backs that up. And it's being able to ask for help and not feeling ashamed or embarrassed or whatever around that, and just being able to take some time out. Amie, I don't know whether you agree, but sometimes when you're feeling massively overwhelmed, even if you just get up off your chair and walk out of your office and go and do something different for 2 minutes and then come back, that feeling can suddenly,
it's like a reset almost.
It's kind of like a bit of a reset for the brain.
That's nice.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I would definitely say, like, in the workplace especially, like Molly said, like the overwhelm, but I think I'm talking from like an ADHD standpoint, but I know that autistic people also find this, is that there's a lot of crossover symptoms and dyslexia, like it's all combined. But I find that the actual specifics of what happens, things like executive dysfunctioning, so that can come under the umbrella of time blindness, task transitioning, poor cognitive working memory, so short-term, long-term memory, the short-term, but those kind of things can actually, you know, be a bit of a barrier, especially if you're working in a corporate setting. So you imagine that you're making all of these little mistakes sometimes, and you're like, I don't know why especially if you don't have a diagnosis. And then also rejection sensitivity can be another one where somebody may just say something the wrong way and we think that it's literally a personal attack. And that can also be challenging, especially if the other person isn't as aware and they don't mean to say it in that way. So those are the sort of things I would say would come up in the workplace for sure.
Definite case of overthinking, isn't it?
Yeah, like
massively. Oh, they said that. Oh my God, that means this. And it means that. And it's like, actually, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But that's how someone can just
feels.
have the hook, and then all of a sudden it's this enormous problem where it's actually just a statement.
It makes sense because, I mean, sometimes I feel, especially now with the hybrid working that we do, don't spend a lot of time in the office. And as much as I love coming in, sometimes I feel a bit exposed when I've left, because I'm thinking, something I struggle with is perception. So I'm thinking, what does that person think of me? What did I say? Like, was I getting on like an idiot, you know? And I think I just couldn't imagine how someone who maybe feels worse than me. Does that make sense? You know?
Definitely.
But it's that like feeling like everyone's looking at you and you're like under a microscope, that sort of way. But I don't know, and we'll maybe come on to it after, sort of, I guess, coping, but it's I can see how that would be hard to cope with for other people too, you know. And going back to what we said about these negative feelings in the workplace, the question is sort of, how can we deal with these negative feelings? But how can anyone, I guess, you know? How can we deal with these more negative feelings when it comes to the workplace and specifically our self-esteem?
So I would definitely say that, you know, reframing how you look at things is a great way to do it, especially, I know I'm talking on neurodiversity terms, but self-esteem in general. If you feel like, I don't know how to explain it, if you feel more empowered about your flaws and the things that you lack in, and you flip them into a positive, like, for example, oh my gosh, I procrastinate so much. Yeah, I procrastinate so much. That just means I get like 7 days of work done in like an hour, you know, and like just trying to flip it so you are more empowered about just owning who you are, really, as opposed to shaming yourself for that. And I think other people have a lot more respect for you. And then also communicating to, I'm actually in my group coaching at the moment, I'm doing a module on that about like communicating in the workplace and how you can, you know, help people understand what your needs are. And I think as well that can be quite empowering too.
Yeah, definitely.
Hugely. I think again, Amie, it's around sometimes how you talk to yourself when you know, when I get something wrong, for me mentally it's like the end of the world.
Yes.
So, oh my God, this is, and you're kind of going, you're so stupid and la, 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 la. But actually I would never say that to a friend.
Yeah.
I would never say that to Noah.
Yeah.
I would kind of go, oh, okay, you got it wrong. That's all right. We all make mistakes. And it's sort of learning to be a little bit kinder to yourself and not automatically jumping down to what you might have been told at school or when you were a child, to kind of go, it's not the end of the world. You know, I mean, I'm not saying I get out of bed to do a bad job, but because of course I don't, but I'm not a brain surgeon.
Yeah.
So if I get something wrong, nobody dies.
We're saving PDFs, we're not saving lives.
Totally.
Yes.
So
Oh,
it's
you're
just
so
kind of
true.
just being able to take a little step back every now and again and kind of going, you know what? You're having a go, mate.
I know you're trying,
Yeah, I love that, Molly. And you're so right, because there's been so many times where I've definitely been so hard on myself as an entrepreneur, like, oh my God, see, and it's like this negative thing in your head, like, told you so, you're not good enough.
You're not good enough.
Yeah, and you have to be like, hold on a minute, you know, you're doing the best that you can. And I think that goes into why a lot of neurodivergents tend to procrastinate on tasks, and because they have a lack of self-trust.
Yes.
Because because people are like, well, how do you become more productive when you got ADHD? I'm like, learn to trust yourself, because you never got told to trust yourself when you were younger, because everything you did was wrong.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of us, like, if I've done something wrong, it automatically reverts back into I'm going to get in trouble. You know?
Yes.
Like, someone sees as my manager, that's it, I'm sacked. You know, like it's
so dramatic.
Exactly. It's like, it's a mix of like catastrophizing and then like all of the rest. You know, I maybe have friends, for example, that suffer with anxiety like me, and it maybe is something happens and they're going to die straight away. You know, it's like about a health thing. Whereas me, it's always someone's going to be standing there and they're going to be shouting at you. You know, so. Everything we do in work, obviously, it goes back to that thing in perception, doesn't it? What do they think? What do they do? And I'm a serial procrastinator, to be honest with me. So now I'm going to tell myself I'm really good at getting 50 jobs done at once.
Exactly. And just like sort of say it, because I think the challenging thing is, for me, I don't have a boss. So I am my own boss. Yeah. And that's been a big learning curve for me, because when I've wanted to start something new, I think I'm getting it wrong automatically. But it's the worst thing you can say to somebody who's got ADHD. There's no right or wrong, and you're like, that's like the but it's true.
I need to know what the boundaries are here.
Exactly.
You can't just give me that. I need to know.
It's the boundaries, because you're like, I could go off on a tangent here.
No. Do either of you have any advice on how to deal with those stressful situations at work? It can be how you deal with it. It can be how you would advise to. But any tips or guidance would be really, really appreciated.
Okay, so if I'm ever given a project to do at work, my immediate reaction, my default go-to is, oh my God, I can't do that. So, and that I have now learned is my immediate reaction. So I kind of just sit with it. It's fine. Of course you can do it. Let's just start sort of cracking on. So I think the first thing is, when you get stressed, it is a feeling, but it doesn't mean that that's the catastrophizing, which is going on in your head, isn't fact and it isn't reality.
True.
And it's also, I think, just, I journal every day, and I find that really helps with being able to put down the thoughts onto paper. And then I look back the next day and I think, crikey, that was a bit of a weird day, wasn't it? Because you're looking back at it, you're taking a step back from it all. So, Amie, I don't know what you think about that.
No, I love that. I was going to say about the journaling, because I also do journaling, but I would say that kind of links on to what I was going to say about like, if you are somebody that does have a neurodiversity or somebody has anxiety, if you start to try and do actions to regulate your nervous system, and I'm not saying just like, when you are feeling stressed, act on it then, just in general throughout your life, start to actively do things that bring you into a sense of a calmer state, then you're probably more likely to deal with those situations better. But like we can't prepare for a trigger to come up or something to happen. I've had emotional meltdowns without me even preparing for it, and I'm like, great, all that self-development went out the window. But a lot of the time, I think just actively having things in your life to support you daily anyways. So some people don't like it, but I enjoy breath work, even if it's like putting on a 5-minute breath work thing that you can get through an app, getting outside in nature, all of those things. But I know that when you do deal with a stressful situation there and then, I think what Molly said is really good about the journaling as well, and just trying to rationalize it. But in that moment, I think if you can just ask for space as well, that can help. So a lot of different things there, definitely.
Journaling is something I want to get into as well. I would love to be one of them fellas that said they've kept a journal for 50 years, but that's why I need to get started. But I almost get frustrated at myself if I haven't been like open enough or like honest enough, or should you be writing this or that. So I think I need to maybe do a bit more and get into it.
So I'm going to challenge you on that.
Okay, nice.
So I think that the reason why we find things so overwhelming is because we put an obscene amount of expectation on ourselves to do it in a certain way. There is no... There's no right or wrong way to do it.
I knew you were going to say that.
There's no, but as in with your own practices for you, whatever, like a page of journaling, three sentences is fine. Like it doesn't have to be this elaborate thing. My arm falls off when it's going to be a big elaborate novel. It is just what works for you as an individual, and that's what I say to my clients as well. And they're like, oh, so I don't have to do like all of this every single day and like jump in the bath, like an ice bath. And I'm like, no, you're fine. Just chill. So.
Something I'm really lucky to live with one of my best friends, and we're both quite similar. We always say if we're in an episode that we're in an ASOT, a state of trance, and how we talk down is we'll talk about how the other was in that situation. We'll sit and we'll debrief after it and say like, you got on like a weirdo, you stormed in there and slammed that door.
I love that.
And I found it really, really helpful, honestly, because one, you're rationalizing what brought you to that point, and then two, you're sort of just making fun of how weird you just seem to the outside world, 100%. And Amie, your business is all about helping women with ADHD manage their symptoms.
Yes.
What sort of clients do you have, and what do they typically struggle with?
So it's been a bit of a journey.
Okay.
So I was a performer, and then I was in the fitness industry for a long time. So the initial pivot on my business was I was supporting women who struggled with health and like obviously exercise, nutrition, to be more consistent with their ADHD. And then as I went along, I started to have a passion because I went through a really bad burnout state. Probably it was last year, actually. I was at the lowest point in my business and there was so much going on. And I was like, I can't run my business this way. And then that's when I had this moment where I was thinking, oh my God, there's so many women out there with ADHD that feel like they have to like conform to hustle culture and, this very masculine way of running a business. And if you've got, neurodiversity, you're already an anxious person, you're more likely to get stressed. You need to actually do the opposite of that. So I would say that I still have a combination of clients, but a lot of my clients, all have similar things that they struggle with, whether it is with exercise and nutrition, or in their businesses. It's very, lacking in consistency, all or nothing mentality, struggling with, just very overwhelmed a lot of the time, overcomplicating things, putting a lot of expectation on themselves as well. And I would say too, like trying to get them out of the shiny object syndrome, because a lot of the time, especially when women come to me for coaching, if they don't see results straight away, it's like, oh, that's it, I'm done with it. So trying to introduce things that are more low dopamine, because I think when you're always chasing like a high dopamine feel all the time, so just trying to kind of bring everything back down to a level playing field. But I would say like it depends on the client. Some clients are need a lot more deeper work. Like with some clients, I do some like subconscious reprogramming with them, hypnotherapy, that kind of thing. And the common thing is though that everybody has limiting beliefs. And that'll come from what we spoke about earlier.
And let's say someone freelances or works from home a lot. They have the lack of that office environment, maybe that regimented state. Are there strategies that they can take to help themselves be happy, be accountable, and be focused when they're working and building a career they love?
Definitely. Do you want to?
Yeah. So I work from home a lot of the time, and sometimes I am really happy about that because I can just get on with stuff and get my head down. And other times I might need some reassurance about something, or I just miss people. So you just have to. So if I'm working in an office, I might walk past your desk, Jordan. I'll say, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch?" You know,
Which I would love, by the way, if we worked together.
You know, what's for tea, or you know, whatever. And so I'll just drop someone a Teams note and say, "You got time for a cuppa?"
Yeah.
You know, or what are you having for lunch, or you know, just like a random conversation that you would have in the office almost, so that it's not all about work, and you know, be able to have that sort of social interaction. Then a lot of team meetings that people have are really business focused, and you know, absolutely right to be, but that does mean that the teams meeting you miss out on that kind of social aspect and that sense of belonging, I guess, that we all need within our workplace.
I agree. Having your lived experience and working with our clients, is there a way that you think that maybe our clients could promote inclusive hiring of neurodiverse candidates, or a way that they could make it easier? Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the big barriers for neurodiverse is around the application process, and having any kind of psychometric tests or anything like that is for a neurodiverse candidate a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's initially going to just put people off. I would love to see more employers ditch that assessment piece, or have something that is neurodiverse friendly.
Yeah.
Not one size fits all, of course. I'm usually relatively good at talking, but I do struggle when I'm stressed at articulating. The words get jumbled up in my head and they all come out a bit odd. So looking at what skill set you're looking for and having a process that is fitting with that. But I do find that the assessment process is a real challenge, and I can remember failing dramatically at a couple of them that I had to go through. And it's very unfair because it again showed that it was one thing, it was around flight times and trying to work out different time zones and stuff. I'm not actually quite sure what assessment it was actually, you know, targeting the end, but I know I failed it terribly. And again, that whole kind of sense of rejection, and it felt like going back and doing an exam again.
Yeah.
But really badly.
Yeah.
So,
and add on to that, it's thinking about ourselves. Do you feel like you've had support in the workplace throughout your career?
I would say since I've been with ManpowerGroup, absolutely, 100%. But coming prior to that, I would say definitely not. And some of that was, I'm not going to say it was my fault, but because I was so ashamed of having it, I never actually told people. So I was constantly trying to mask it. And of course, that then comes across as lacking attention, sometimes lacking focus, making silly mistakes, saying things that weren't necessarily appropriate because that was in my head and I needed to say it. But since I've been here, I found absolutely, I'm not sure celebrated is the right word, but people just accept me for me and my funny little quirks, but also the strengths that brings to the team and to the organisation.
And something I've been thinking about is just the disclosure of it, you know? So do you find is there a time point? And I suppose it's the question for you both, and probably a different answer for you both. But when do you think is the right time, if there is one, to bring up that you know, are in this space, you're under the neurodiverse umbrella?
Yeah. So I think for me, like, the irony is, obviously my business is, you know,
It says on the
it
tin.
says it on the tin,
Yeah.
but still, like, with I find that sometimes, like, there's been so many things that I've learned over this last year, especially working in a client facing job, things that came up for me that I didn't even think I needed to work through. And I think the biggest thing that I struggled with was boundary setting. And that was definitely something that I had to build up a lot of confidence to, you know, because even though I'm a neurodivergent, I work with other neurodiverse women. Sometimes I think they forget that I am also in that space too. Yeah. And I'm not just a robot. Like, you have to respect that I also have needs. I was I was in burnout on Friday, and I'm still not feeling 100%, you know, focused. And when I know that I'm burnt out, it's more that I'll have avoidance around like admin, like work stuff I will have to do on my laptop. Yeah. I'm happy to talk, but it's the stuff that really requires the focus. Yeah. But anyways, I found that my client, like a few clients, were kind of not really, not understanding, just sort of not respecting that. Yeah. And you do have to kind of say, hey guys, I am feeling this way. And then not take that shame into the mix, because then there's that, oh, well, I should be more superior. I shouldn't have these bad things happen because I'm the person that people are coming to with the lived experience. Yeah. So I think that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes as well, for sure.
Yeah. I'm still trying to work that out, Jordan, to be totally honest with you. I never know. Obviously my team know, and people that I work with a lot tend to know, and I may say to someone, can you just explain that to me again, while I'm building up my picture or draw my little Visio diagram or whatever I'm doing. But for people that don't know me, and if we're talking around data, which is one of my I really need someone to kind of, almost like I'm 6, talk me through it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm never quite sure when I need to say, I'm dyslexic and I just need a bit more support with this. Yeah. Because again, I'm trying, it's that stigma of trying not to, I don't want you to treat me differently, but I need you to treat me differently. Yeah. So how does that bit work?
I can relate, Molly, because even though I don't obviously have a team of people that I work with, I do actively pay to be parts of mentorships and stuff to have that kind of like community and have mentors to help. And the reason why I ended up running my business with the ADHD is because I actually said to the person who was going to be mentoring me, oh, by the way, I probably need to learn in a different way because I have ADHD. So if it wasn't for me saying that, I probably wouldn't be here today. Yeah. But I'm definitely a one to say it quite soon on.
Yes.
But I guess it's different if you are in a more employed role. I did think about, maybe I should put something on my auto signature, or maybe I should do something like that. I don't know. I guess
if that works for you, that works for you. Do you know what I mean? It's having the room to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit off topic, but we look at, in the BRG that I'm with in ManpowerGroup, for it's like our LGBTQIA plus community. We have people who are non-binary, and having they them on their teams is such a cue, because if you're walking into a room and someone doesn't present the way they are supposed to present, you don't have, you can see that, or you can be cautious. Whereas saying she or he in that instance on Teams, where someone can't see you and speak to you that way, is difficult. But there's almost not a flag that you can have to say, I'm neurodiverse. I need you to tolerate me a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's it. And do you think, because now awareness of neurodiversity is growing, that even though there's still not a lot of people that maybe understand that DS Philist, do you think that colleagues are coping with it more? Do you think they're becoming more understanding and more aware?
So obviously I still work with women that are in corporate jobs. And I think that it's relative to the company. Yeah. I've got some clients that say that people are very understanding, and other clients that I wouldn't say have really communicated it to they don't feel like that's an open door for them to do that.
Yeah.
But I think as a whole, there's obviously some fantastic people out there. A good friend of mine, Alex Partridge, ADHD chatter, he talks a lot and advocates for people in the workspace who do have ADHD and how it needs to be, or neurodiversities, and it needs to be something considered and not just, it doesn't really matter. So I think it does depend on the company, but as a whole, I think that there is more awareness to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you, have you been able to build a sense of community? Yous are here together and you have a story that relates, but in the day-to-day, do you know many other people that are similar to you, and how do you sort of foster that?
Well, we're very fortunate in ManpowerGroup that we have affinity networks, and I'm part of the disability affinity network, which is brilliant. We raise a lot of awareness around hidden disabilities as well as physical disabilities. I think it again, because not everyone has the diagnostics, and again, I go back to that being really key to it. I feel that some people don't have that kind of label attached to them, which might make them think that they shouldn't be part of that affinity group or part of that networking group. And actually, it can affect so many people. And the more you understand that it's not your fault, it's just the way that your brain is built, the better. I mean, I would, love to be able to mentor someone who is neurodiverse within the organisation. It's just kind of finding them, I guess, or getting that right approach. And some people are happy not to tell people, and that's fine as well. You have to respect that.
100%. So what if we don't have a formal diagnosis? Can we still get support?
100%. I think, on social media, the amount of women I speak to that are like, oh, I'm not fully diagnosed, but I'm self-diagnosed. And I don't think that there is any shame or anything wrong with that at all. I think that, because without having medication, of course you do need a diagnosis for that. But if you want to manage it holistically, if you have an awareness that you think that you've got it, just start taking the steps to trying to manage it, assuming that you do.
Yeah.
And then if that does come to a point where you do get a formal diagnosis, you're already ahead of the game. So I think that you can still definitely get support. And I don't know whether there is a black and white of saying, oh, I have ADHD, but I haven't got a diagnosis. I don't know if that's necessary to even say that you don't have the diagnosis, to be honest. Yeah. I personally think that if you think that you've got it, and there comes a time where you have to, especially if you're in a work environment and you want to feel supported, then why not communicate that?
Yeah. I absolutely agree. It's around you need to work out yourself what support you need, and sometimes that can be very difficult for your brain to articulate. But for instance, I know that if I'm reading text, that's a real struggle for me, and I might need someone to help me just give me the bullet points, like what's it saying. And that's okay to ask that question. But just understanding where your weaknesses are is really important. So again, you can just ask for help. You can say, I just need a little bit of help with this, and what do these numbers actually mean?
Before I let you both go, what would be your advice to someone who is struggling with their current setup in the workplace?
I would say that my advice to somebody that is struggling is, number one, just kind of start to maybe communicate with people that you are struggling. And I know that's sometimes the hardest thing to do, especially if you don't feel like you are in a place where that is an open invitation to communicate. But I would say that just do the things that you can do the research that you can do. There's plenty online now to sort of see the little techniques that you can use to help you be more productive in your days. But also, whether that is having to speak to somebody in the workplace or whether you've got a friend that you can reach out to, I think just sharing that you are finding it quite challenging, and sharing that experience with somebody could be really useful, because they may come back and say that they feel exactly the same. So whether it is that one person in the office that you confide in the most, and then just having a look and seeing what little tools and techniques that you can use from free resources online to just help with your productivity. and also seeking out therapeutic practices and stuff too.
Yeah. And perfect chance for a little humble plug. Where can our listeners follow you?
So you guys can find me on Instagram on _Amie Barlow. And yeah, that's pretty much where my main business runs from. So
Great. And Molly, are we going to plug your LinkedIn here or?
Yes, come and find me. I'm Molly Reid on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect, and I would really love to hear any stories about anyone else that perhaps has had a late diagnosis or suspects they may have a fabulous, different, quirky brain.
yes.
And that's the end of today's episode. I just want to say a huge thanks to Amie and Molly for joining me and sharing their deeply personal insights around this topic. And if you're looking for a new role, why not check out Brook Street Recruitment? There may just be a dream job waiting there for you. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend or a colleague, and don't forget to follow us on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you, and see you later.